Esteemed speakers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Opening Green Windows Technological Opportunity for a Low Carbon World in Asia and the Pacific, which is organized by UNCTAD, ESCAP, and ITD. My name is Kanokwan Chantri, an academic officer from ITD. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a hybrid meeting that will be recorded. If you would like a copy of the recorded video, please contact an IT person. And if you're joining virtually, please set up your name and organization, and please make sure to mute your microphone unless you're speaking. And if you're here in this room, please press the mic button to speak. This event aims to provide an opportunity for peer learning and to raise awareness of policy options for leveraging frontier technologies to achieve sustainable economic growth in the Asia-Pacific region. Today, we are honored to have three distinguished speakers who will deliver the opening remarks. I'd like to invite Ms. Shamika N. Suriman, the Director of the Division on Technology and Logistics at UNCTAD, to give us an opening remark.
Thank you, dear moderator, dear Sangmin, dear Supaki, thank you for your support in co-organizing this event. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you for joining us today. So we are very pleased to present the Technology and Innovation Report 2023, which provides very timely contributions to the annual session of ESCAP under the theme of accelerating climate action in Asia and the Pacific for sustainable development. Let me take you through three key messages of the report, and later on, my colleague Clovis will make you the full presentation of the report, and also we'll have an interactive discussion to explore policy options for countries in the region. Now, first, we are at the beginning of a technological revolution based on green technologies. Developing countries must act quickly to seize green windows of opportunity. Early adopters will be able to move ahead quicker along a development trajectory leading to more productive and cleaner economies. And the phrase early adopters is a very important one, because this is what we have seen in all other technological revolution. You come early, you capture the opportunities. Second, developing countries need agency and urgency in coming up with the right policy responses. Our Frontier Technology Readiness Index shows that several economies in the region have made important policy changes that have enabled them to perform far better than expected according to their GDP per capita. We have India, the Philippines, and Vietnam basically overperforming in a very big scale. Nevertheless, the majority of the region is not ready to harness the full potential of frontier technologies. We call on all governments to be proactive in building basic infrastructure and innovation capacities, without which it would be difficult to attract the private sector to these new technologies and to take high risk in these new endeavors. Thirdly, the success of national policies will very much depend on global cooperation through international trade, intellectual property rights systems, and research collaboration. I think this is something ITD knows very well and done enormous amount of research, very good research in this area. So immediate support from the international community is critical to enable and empower developing countries to take advantage of green technologies. So, ladies and gentlemen, Asia and the Pacific offers a lot of successful examples and good practices on green innovation. And when we launch this report in other regions, this is something that we constantly hear, is the need to learn from Asia Pacific. So hope this event will serve as a platform for peer learning and idea exchange among yourselves. And I look very much forward to a very fruitful discussion on the ways to leverage green technologies to accelerate sustainable development in the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sirman. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Sang Min Nam, the Director of the Environment and Development Division at ESCAP, to give us an opening remark.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning to Geneva. Thank you for inviting us to join this side event on our commission session. As Shamika mentioned, this commission session is held under the theme of accelerating climate action in Asia Pacific. So which is the first time for our commission session to be held under the theme of climate change. So in this, for this commission session, we presented our theme study, which highlights that Asia Pacific, despite its global share of GHG emission over 50%, the current trend continues. And so the emission, we are looking at the combined NDC target of our member state. So by 2030, the level of GHG emission from Asia Pacific will be 10% lower than today, but it will be still 16% higher than 2010 level, which is the baseline year for mobilizing global action towards 2030. And then in this regard, our theme study also highlights essential role of low carbon and zero carbon technologies in decarbonizing energy, transport, and industry, and also supported by finance and policies to accelerate the decarbonization. Of course, this should be also supported by multilateral and regional cooperation. So in this connection, we also was very excited to see this UNCTAD report, technology and innovation report, that focuses on technological opportunities for low carbon world. So while we recognize the increasing impact of climate change, we also recognize the need to highlight both urgency of action and opportunities that it creates. This report illustrates the existing opportunities and how we can seize them, and which echoes the idea of Saint-Exupéry, who is the author of Little Prince. So he said, if you want to build a ship, teach people to yearn for the vast and endless sea. So if you can present opportunities we can have by moving on to low carbon transition, so it can really mobilize political action and then mobilize investment from private sector. So in addition to highlighting the impact of climate change, now we are experiencing also in Southeast Asia, in Bangkok, I wish we can also highlight opportunities that we can have in the future. So this report illustrates what kind of opportunities we have and then how we can seize them. Of course, in this context, policy is a real policy matter. The report underlines that the required capabilities are not just scientific and technical skills, but also policies, regulations, and infrastructure for developing countries to really utilize economic gains associated with new technologies. So this is a really important message for us to take away. And so this also highlights, confirms the value of a regional and multilateral and multi-stakeholder cooperation on sharing policies for technology development and application. So tomorrow, the Commission will conclude its session, and they will adopt a resolution on accelerating climate action in Asia and Pacific. So this resolution calls on promoting information sharing, policy dialogue, technical assistance, and cooperation to develop policies that support implementation of NDCs and low carbon climate resilient development. So in this regard, I really anticipate using this report as a key reference for facilitating our regional dialogue and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nam. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Supakit Jarankun, the Deputy Executive Director of ITD, to give us an opening remark.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the side event on the topic of the opening green windows technological opportunities for the low carbon world in Asia and the Pacific. First of all, I would like to express my deepest appreciation to Ms. Shamika, Director of the Division on Technology and Logistics of UNCTAD, Mr. Sang Min Nam, Director of the Environment and Development Division of ESCAP, for co-organizing this important event. The International Institute for Trade and Development, or ITD, has an important role in enhancing capacity building to support the economic growth for this region through research, training, and seminar activities, focusing on emerging issues in the field of trade, investment, and development. And one of those issues that we are now interested in is the use of technology and innovation on trade and investment. As we all are aware, today our world is facing many social and economic challenges, including economic slowdown, energy crisis, and climate change. All of these have affected greatly on world economy, especially for least developing and developing countries. To tackle this crisis, we believe that technology and innovation need to be put in place, starting with opening green windows to a green economy. Therefore, all relevant parties needs to change the model by using better and greener technology and innovation to build a strong capacity for the economy while achieving sustainable development goals. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to study ideas from UNCTAD's Technology and Innovation Report 2023, followed by an interactive discussion between experts on how to achieve carbon neutrality at the national and international level. Therefore, today is a good opportunity to accelerate the exchange of opinions from the experts. I'm confident that you will find new ideas about strategic policy options to achieve economic growth, environmental sustainability, and support of the SDGs, while promoting the green economy opportunities through technology and innovations. Lastly, I wish to extend my greatest appreciation to our moderators and panelists for being here with us today. And thank you all for attending the seminar. I wish you would find the seminar useful and productive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supakit. Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Clovis Ferrer Jr., Team Leader of the Technology and Innovation Report 2023 from UNCTAD, to present the report.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to my dear colleagues there in Bangkok. I'm very pleased to present this summary of the Technology Innovation Report 2023. I had the honor to lead the great team that prepared this report under the guidance of Dr. Shamika. I want to acknowledge at the beginning Dr. Rasmus Lema from UNU Merit, Dr. Roberta Rabellotti from the University of Pavia, Dr. Andreas Stamp from German Institute for Development Policy, and my colleagues Fabiana Basil, Nizeng, and Zenata Hassanuddin. So let me start, as Shamika mentioned, and highlighting her opening remarks, we are at the beginning of this green technological revolution, and developing countries must catch this revolution early, at the beginning of it. So the report, it focuses on opportunities presented by green innovation in developing countries to boost economic and technological development. So the idea is to close this great divide that we see in this slide in income per capita between developed and developing countries, which has only increased with each technological revolution. I'm so sorry, I think I passed too fast. This was the slide with this great divide between developed and developing countries. So there are great opportunities in the development of green and frontier technologies. In this report, we provide a comprehensive picture of 17 of these technologies. These include artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, green hydrogen, electric vehicles, and many others. We analyze the market size, their potential to create jobs, and the most promising sectors of these technologies. And these technologies already represent like a $1.5 trillion market, which could grow to over $9.5 trillion by 2030. This is about 3 times of the size of the Indian economy, just to give an idea. But so far, developed economies are getting most of the opportunities, really leaving developing countries behind. At this moment, most of the top frontier technology providers, most of the companies, are from the United States. In this table, they are highlighted in dark blue. are from other developed countries that are shown in light blue, and only few of them are from developing countries, China in orange and other developing countries in yellow in this table. So to take advantage of the full potential of the frontier technologies and green technologies, countries really have to move fast and get prepared to use and develop them. In the report, we also present this latest readiness index that combines ICT, skills, R&D, industrial capacity, and financial indicators. This index, it shows that developing countries as a group, they have lower rankings for, in particular for ICT connectivity and skills. This time around, we have the ranked for 166 countries. And as in the previous edition of the report, the rank is dominated by high-income economies. It's not a surprise there. But some developing economies, they have made very important policy change and have enabled them to perform better than expected, as mentioned by Dr. Shamika. So India remains the greatest overperformer, ranking 67 positions better than expected, followed by Philippines, the Philippines with 54 positions higher, and Vietnam with 44 positions higher than expected. The report also provides analysis of 3 paths where developing countries can take action to benefit from this new technological revolution. So the first path that we analyze is using and developing renewable energy technologies. The second one is by greening traditional global value chains by using digital technologies associated with Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing. And the third pathway is by diversifying the economies towards production sectors that are what we call more complex, that the meaning is that they require higher levels of technology and that also are associated with lower carbon footprints. If we start with the renewable energy technology, looking there first, there is significant variability in catch-up trajectories at the sector and country level when we take a look on the experience of many countries. But the best scenario of taking advantage of these green windows of opportunity is when a country has strong preconditions and that's combined with a strong response. So for example, in the case of solar, PV, and biomass in China, the country had adequate preconditions already in terms of industrial capacity, but it also showed a strong response in the development of the technology. Some of the key initiatives that were enacted, for example, is the 2006 Renewable Energy Law, and that set incentives for entering international markets. There was the 1,000 Talents Plan that attracted global experts and also the experts from diaspora. And initiatives to boost domestic demand is also very important in all catch-up trajectories. In the case of China, one of those was solar rooftop subsidy program. There was others as well. But the lack of strong preconditions does not mean that the country will lose this window of opportunity. The window of opportunity is not closed. Much really depend on the response, the response at different levels of the government, the involvement of the public and private stakeholders. So the response is what is really important. One example that we have in the report is that the Thai government, it had at the beginning addressed some initial weak preconditions that related to biofuel. There was a low interest of the private sector due to the high investment costs. But through a strong policy response, such as subsidies, tax incentives, mandatory purchasing of energy generated, that encouraged the private sector to invest and also encourage learning and innovation in this sector. Developing countries can also benefit from these two processes that are very much linked, that is the greening and the digitalization of the global value chains. The greening of the traditional global value chains, it can be done by switching to digital technologies associated to smart manufacturing, as I mentioned. But this greening also, it is happening separated from the digital area. So it's based on voluntary sustainability standards, which has triggered a series of changes in the value chain from upstream inputs to production process, from product design to downstream consumption. So these voluntary sustainability standards are gaining ground particularly in countries that are more diversified, export-oriented economies, including in developing countries such as India, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So these two process of greening and digitalizing, they should get closer together to really become a twin process to move the sustainability of global value chains. And with regards to the opportunities for greener production for developing countries, in products that are more complex, associated with higher technology, and also associated with lower carbon footprint. So what this requires that governments should have the capacity to assess and prioritize these potential new sectors. Governments have to take into account, countries' existing technological and productive capacities, the availability of natural resource, considering how their companies can fit into global value chains. So they need to have capacity to do that. To support countries in choosing these greener pathways, in UNCTAD, we have produced an index of economic complexity and carbon footprint for over 43,000 products that are exported in the international markets. And we presented in a very original methodology that identified the ones that are most complex. So we'll bring more technological capabilities there, and that also associated with lower carbon footprints. So based on the experience of developing countries, and in this earlier case of technological change and catch-up that we analyze in the report, we argue that developing countries, they should take several steps to diversify towards more complex and greener production, and also to get into renewable energy sectors. This catch-up process really require a proactive, strong effort from the government and within an enabling international economic environment. From the national policy side, they should focus on aligning environmental and industrial and innovation policies, prioritize investment in greener and more complex sectors, provide incentives in infrastructure that can help shift consumer demand towards these greener products. They also need to have more general pro-innovation policies, such as investment in R&D, in digital infrastructure and skills, in education and public and business sectors about green technologies. But now, much of these domestic policies will only be successful with the cooperation through international trade. You see, for less technologically advanced developing countries, these greener sectors and sectors on renewable energy, in most cases, they do not exist yet in these economies, particularly in the production side. So trade rules should permit these developing countries that are less technologically advanced to protect these green industries that are infant green industries through tariffs, subsidies, public procurement. So they can not only meet the local demand, but over time build the capabilities to be able to export as well. So an effort in this direction in terms of trade agenda would also introduce consistency between the international trade framework and international agreements about action to address climate change. Intellectual property is another field in which introduction for greater flexibility for less technologically capable developing countries is needed regarding the green technology. So that will make them more consistent with their global climate agreements. So in conclusion, what we have seen is that most of the technology needed to promote economic growth and greener production are already out there. What is needed is really political will to help developing countries build the capacities to absorb these technologies and innovate for a more inclusive and sustainable future. And developing countries should act timely in terms of innovation, industrial and energy policies that are aligned to really catch up this green technological revolution at the early stage. Thank you very much for your attention and look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clovis Ferre Jr. for the very informative presentation. Now it's time for our panel discussion. I'd like to invite Dr. Dam Sukontasap, Board of Directors of ITD, to be a moderator for the next session of the event.
Thank you very much. I don't know how much time we actually have. Do we still have until 1:45? Yes, I think so. Yes. Okay. So all right. So I'll try to go very quickly. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very much aware that we are right in the middle of your lunchtime. Good morning and good evening to our colleagues in the US and in Europe. We have this afternoon, we have the honor to have three very distinguished speakers with us. Let me very briefly introduce them. The furthest to my left would be Monsieur Laurent Dudet, Counselor of the EU delegation to Thailand. Kun Dudet is in charge of agriculture, the environment, and sanitary and phytosanitary issues at the EU mission. Mr. Dudet is a lawyer by training. The second speaker, Dr. Surachai Satit Kunarat, Executive Director of APEC Center for Technology Foresight, or APEC CTF, here in Bangkok. Aside from the said position, Kun Surachai is also Assistant to the Minister of Higher Education, Science, Research and Innovation of Thailand. Dr. Surachai is a civil engineer by training. Our third and last speaker is Dr. Thirawat Limpi Banteng, President of Siam Denso Manufacturing Company Limited. Aside from the said position, Dr. Thirawat is also a member of the Committee of Climate Change of the Federation of Industries of Thailand. Kun Thirawat is also an engineer by training. With that introduction aside, I would like to proceed into our discussion. Please note that we have a total of, I believe, less than 20 minutes now in our discussion. And we will also try to open up the floor for Q&A as well. Therefore, for each of the questions that I would ask, I would like to request that each of the speakers limit their response by 2 to 3 minutes. In that way, all the speakers will be able to get a chance to share their views with all of us. That said, let's go into our first question. We have already heard from our the opening remarks from our distinguished officials, including Mr. Ferre, who has just outlined it to us, the summary of the Technology and Innovation Report 2023. So my first question would be, we know that we are still far behind the US and Europe in terms of our low carbon policies and way of life. In your view, let me ask the question starting from Mr. Dudet. How far along do you think we are in the Asia Pacific region in terms of promoting environmental and low carbon policies when compared to our colleagues in the US and Europe?
Well, thank you very much. First, let me just say just a very short word to thank you for convening the EU to participate to this discussion. We are very honored to be here today. And I would also like to say that we share fully the conclusion of this report, which is very informative, very well done, and I think can be a tool also to support the third countries in the region. when it comes to the comparison between the Southeast Asian countries and the EU or the US, yes, you are right, they are still behind, but we see very positive development over the last years. We have seen, for instance, enhanced level of ambition in COP26, in COP27 by many of these countries, including Thailand, for instance, anticipating its target for carbon neutrality from 2065 to 2050, for instance. So we welcome these developments. We welcome some new policies like the BCG also in Thailand, which was also backed by the APEC during the last summit. But we should also keep in mind that this enhanced level of ambitions were conditioned by access to finance and also assistance from the developed countries. So we have also to take our share of responsibility to make sure that they will not be left behind and that they can catch up the developed countries when it comes to the green economy. Maybe I'll come back a bit later on that, but of course the EU is continuously now developing its sustainable policy through the Green Deal. So there is not a week or a month without a new initiative. And we're also aware that some of these initiatives may have an impact on trade with some of our trade partners, notably in Asia and Pacific. But we are carrying this, and our objective is not to disturb trade. On the contrary, we try to take it as an opportunity for the third countries also to catch up, and we will accompany them in the development of their policies for this reason. Yeah, I will stop here for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Lude. Now, Dr. Surachai, how well equipped are we to capture the green window of opportunity?
Allow me to correct my position first. In fact, I'm just really a staff of the minister, not assistant to the minister. And besides the executive director of the APEC Center for Technology Foresight, I act as Vice President of Office of National Higher Education, Science Research and Innovation Policy Council on NXPO, Thailand. Before respond to opportunities to the green windows, just want to respond to the first question also. How far? I think so. We always far, not only distance, but always gap, huge gap between the developing countries, developing economies, and developed economies. Why I say like this? If we are in the negotiation or consultation with people in climate change forum, for example, in UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, we agree. I mean, developed country and developing countries, we agree in the principle by law on the term of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. It means not equal responsible for climate change or greenhouse gas emission. So we not able to reduce the gap or to catch up to developing countries, to developed country. So we need to engage or to work with developed country by use some mechanisms under UN mechanisms, for example, like Kyoto Protocol, like CDM, Clean Development Mechanisms, to support developing country by developed country to help by transfer technology and finance. This is my first point to react to the first question. Also, if I may, for the green opportunity to the greens, yes, sure, we want to be clean or cleaner, but again, this is we must carefully consider our circumstance. I would like to refer to this report. In the overview report, state that the consequence for opening green windows. Allow me to read. The starting point is experimenting with new ideas and technologies and adapting these to local circumstances, value and priorities. So it means we need to take care our industry, our people, and our business before we jump to the cleaner. So we need to use some policy like the trade-off policy, like the carbon credit before we move from business as usual to the cleaner stage. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Chirawat, it's your turn now. So how far along do you think we are in terms of promoting environment and low carbon policies? How well equipped are we? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator, for these questions. Let me give some perspective of industrial sector, maybe a little bit different viewpoint from today. I have to say like this, in terms of awareness, I think in Thailand or in Asia Pacific, the awareness it is not so far from Europe or America. I think in this point of view, I think the people in Asia Pacific can catch the trend and know they have to change. But the big gap in industry sector is very, how can I say, a big range in region. If you can understand, in our Asia region, we have many kind of industry. Some is a global company. For example, my company, we have mother company in Japan, and we have a lot of, how can I say, overseas company around the world. This kind of company, I don't think that we are far from America or Europe in terms of the awareness and how we can prepare. But the problem, I think, is far away is about some kind like a local industry. For example, even in my supply chain, in the real world, when we are talking about carbon neutrality, many of our suppliers still cannot understand what is carbon neutrality. Why carbon neutrality related to energy? Some kind like that. So that I have to say that this kind of the difference in starting points occur in Asia Pacific. And in order to change to green windows, I think everybody would like to change to green window because they know that that is a new opportunity. But the gap of the far is the obstacle. I would like you to image, for example, in Asia Pacific, some of many of our industry is SME. This kind of SME, if we compare to, for example, Japan or Europe, if we look at the graph that already report previously, maybe around 10 or 20 years ago. So it's mean that if we would like to drastic change, there are a lot of gap, so that we need a lot of cost, a lot of budget, financial support, and more of that. Even we can pour in the money, we can change the hardware, but when we are going to implement or when we are going to operate, the more difficult is about the far or the gap of human capability. The more complex the system need higher human capability. This one is the big and the biggest, how can I say, distance compared to Europe and America in my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me move on to the second question, because while Mr. Luday has alluded to the developments in the region, especially in terms of the government policies, Dr. Surachai mentioned that we need to make sure that people are ready to move along towards a green culture. And now Dr. Chirawat has mentioned that the understanding is still low, and there's still a big gap of human capability. So my second question is, what needs to be fixed in terms of trying to promote green technology and innovation in this region? Mr. Luday, you mentioned that investment is needed. We can, of course, we can launch policies, but we need to put money where our mouth is. And so what would you recommend? How do we make sure that we can promote green technology and innovation as a part of national development priority in this part of the world?
Well, thank you for this complex question. Well, actually, there are, of course, you have to catch up on investment and get access to the finance, as I already mentioned. But there are also some ideological points to be considered. Sometimes we really understand the reluctance or the resistance on some of the countries here to some of the standards we try to set at the EU level, for instance. But in some cases, it's more a question of, I would say, automatic or ideological protectionism, which is a bit regrettable. This is the case, for instance, for the Global Methane Pledge, for instance, just to give you a few examples, for instance, where we do not see really any reason why some countries in the region are not getting on board, where there is no national commitment. It's just a kind of a global ambition. The technologies and innovation tools are there, so there is nothing to justify some countries do not join, for instance, this kind of initiatives. Then for finance, access to finance, well, I think the governments also need to set a correct environment by regulation, by institution, by education. In the report, it's flagged that for many of these developing countries, there are opportunities, but not the skills. So I think they have to work on this. We know that these countries are also working on taxonomy. I think it's a very good approach also to attract investment from third countries and also internally here in Thailand and other Asian countries. Yes, well, I will stop here because we could discuss about it for hours, but yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. What about you, Dr. Surachai? Mr. Freile mentioned to us that governments should set the direction towards green technology and innovation, and then basically to put it on the top agenda of national development. What else do you think is needed to help make that push happen?
Thank you very much. Even I come from a government sector or public sector, but I don't believe that if government set the top priority to the green society or climate change mitigation, it need to engage and to work with our private sector or industrial sector, because the technology and the process in industry is on the hand of the private sector. Even government set the priority is not enough. And allow me to recommend, but governments, the role of government still need in set the priority as like Thailand, we set our new growth engine on biocircular clean economy or BCG, but we need to work with I would say research institute or universities, because if we want to improve the process in industrial line, or we want to replace some renewable energy or replace new technology, we need the research. Even this report focus on frontier technologies. But in theory of research and development, most of research fail to market. So we need to invest by government. I mean, private sector or industrial might not able to invest every research and development, in particular in S&T infrastructure, like the metrology, like huge laboratory, for example. Government, research institute, industry, and last but not least, we need to link to international forum or international organization, because this is the global issue. We cannot implement within our country. We need to measurement, reporting, and verification, or MRV, and we need to give the confidential to international organization to believe how much or how many we can reduce our greenhouse gas emission. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Surachai. Dr. Chirawat, coming from the private sector, and as I mentioned earlier, you also work within the Federation of Thai Industries. And I'm sure you're also trying to push the government harder on promoting a low carbon society. But you also mentioned that there's a big gap of capability. What do you think is needed to make that happen? Where should we find the funding? For example, Mr. Freire mentioned about the need to provide subsidies, to provide incentives, to draw up regulations on the global value chain. In the private sector, how do you think all of this can come about?
Okay, thank you very much. It is a very interesting questions. Maybe my question is not realistic or practical, just the concept, maybe my answer. So far, I think the subsidy or the support declaration or countermeasure from government is very conventional. For example, just incentive or subsidy in order to reduce about, for example, investment or cost or something. In such kind of system, I think it is a little bit attractive, but it's still very difficult to take a risk. In our private sector, we know that in order to speed up the learning curve, we have to do more and more. Sometimes we intend to fail in order to learn something. So that I think it's possible for us to have some more attractive regulation, not only incentive or subsidies, but how can the people who start doing something can get the merit from that project? Not only reduce, but also gain. I think in such case, maybe private sector will try to challenge something. For example, the way that we are doing in the Federal Industry of Thailand, we would like to put something like how can I say, peer-to-peer electricity trading, or even carbon credit market or something. In such kind of how can I say, the system that the people who doing something can gain more, so that the barrier of the cost will become lower, so that it will a little bit more attract for the private sector to do many things much more. And another one is not only in only only in the same country. For example, in my point of view, I am a global company, and of course, many countries has different regulation. Is it possible that, for example, some international community, such as this community, can have some support so that a little bit lift up or release some barrier between country, so that the power of public sector that has many companies around the world can collaborate much more close and more actively. I think that is another more attractive way to utilize the private sector power and capability. That is, and also it will be naturally transfer the technology from developed country to developing country, not from country to country, but from the same company pipeline. That is my idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Chirawat. Let me move on to the third question and perhaps the last question from me before I open up the floor for Q&As. Again, Mr. Lude, how can we genuinely forge a long-term and sustainable partnership among all the stakeholders in the society in promoting the green effort? And when I mention about all the stakeholders, it's as we're aware, it will be the government, the private sector, academia, the civil society, the youth, and including the general public as well. We need an inclusive effort, but how can we forge that?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think it's important also to realize that in developing countries, we are not talking about the same kind of operators. There are the differences of development or readiness to go to these policies is very different. Whether we're talking about global companies, or sometimes it's not necessarily global companies, but export-oriented companies, which are not necessarily global, but very export-oriented, and they need by themselves to adapt, and they don't have to wait for the government actually to take action. They do it. We are in contact, of course, with the Thai industry, and they are not waiting for the Thai government to set policies to adapt, to make sure that they will maintain their market shares in Europe or in the US or in Japan or in other countries. This said, we need to make sure that not only these operators will be able to move in the right direction, otherwise there will be some additional problems in the future, because we need also the SMEs and all parts of the sectors to be involved in this green growth, even the farmers, even when I talk about a small farmer, for instance. So we have to take everyone on board, so that what the EU is trying to do with dialogue with the different government in the multilateral fora, be it at the WTO, or other COPs, for instance. And we, of course, have a full set of cooperation provisions. We set the Global Gateway, which is now our tool to cooperate globally with the third countries to help them to make the transition to a green economy. So it's about 300 billion euro that we will mobilize between 2021 and 2027 in that respect, and to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to move in the right directions. But there are many other tools, many other ways. Trade is another option. We will now start a free trade negotiation with Thailand. There will be a deep and comprehensive chapter on trade and sustainable development. So all of these activities help to get everyone on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Surachai, how can we make sure that we can forge a long-term partnership among all the stakeholders so we can finally capture the green window of opportunities?
I believe that if someone's stomach is empty, they need to fill their stomach before they dress a good dressing. So it means the world is pressure us, pressure our country, in particular in developing countries. We have started from INDC, initial nationally determined contribution to NDC, to BUR, biennial update report. It means more pressure. Or Green Deal, or next CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, is pressure to our industry. So I believe they need to adapt themselves to the global value chain. So this is I'm not worried about how we can adapt to these clean windows. But I have another point of view. This is mitigation issues. This is how we can reduce the greenhouse gases. We have committed to international forum on carbon neutrality or GHG net zero. So this is in the view of mitigation, but we still have, even it's not out of scope of today, but in the view of developing country, we still need adapt to climate change. How we can adaptation to climate change in many sectors. Maybe it's quite more difficult than mitigation sector. So this is excluding in this report. I need 30 seconds to comment in this report. Just a minute. For this report, it seems to focus on frontier technology in mitigations. Quite frontiers is different meaning, depends on the context. Like frontier in my country maybe is not frontier in developed country. So we need to reconsider the definition of frontier. And for the technology, frontier technology in this, I think it seems to lack of nature-based solution technology to mitigate greenhouse gas. So I would like to, if I may, I would like to recommend to add this issue to this context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chirawat, again, coming from the private sector, who should take the lead, the government or the private sector, in trying to forge the efforts towards capturing the green window of opportunities?
I think this one, I have to say that it should be the integration together. I think if we would like to drive and make sure about the success of green transformation and also sustainable collaboration among stakeholders, I think the most important thing is the common scenario. What the meaning of my common scenario is not only the numerical targets, but we should make something like what is the sustainable society image that we would like to make. If we have the same common image, we can identify together which part that government can contribute, which part that the private sector can contribute, and which part that the academic sector can contribute. And also many of private sector and academic also have their own specialists, so that this kind of not numerical, but the image that the society that we would like to make, this one we should have some, how can I say, working team or some collaboration among stakeholders to make the common scenario and this image. I think this one is the most, how can I say, starting point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it should open up the floor now. We have a few minutes left. We have 5 minutes left. So I would like to open the floor for questions and comments. Anything from the floor? Okay. If not, then please allow me to ask the last question. All of you have given very interesting responses to my question. Mr. Luday said that many tools and many there are many what's the word, tools that we can use in order to promote the forging of a sustainable partnership. Dr. Surachai cautioned a bit that while efforts can continue, but we need to make sure that everyone is ready to move along with our effort. And Dr. Chirawat mentioned that why not try to identify which stakeholder can contribute what to this effort. So all of these are interesting responses. My final question is this. We're not talking only about Thailand or Southeast Asia. We're talking about the Asia Pacific region as a whole. And we are also talking about what's going on in other parts of the world, in the US, in Europe, in Africa. So what kind of role, what kind of contribution, what kind of cooperation do you think the Asia Pacific region can expect from our partners, our colleagues in other parts of the world? What would be the success stories? What would be the learning that we can take from our friends from other parts of the world? Mr. Luday, would you try to attempt to answer this question?
Well, actually, there is always different dimension, the bilateral or the multilateral, or even the plurilateral. I think we should not wait to be all on board to move on. So, of course, the best we can do in the different COPs, for instance, we should do, and we should fight for that to get everybody on board. We should also make sure that all the developed countries deliver on their commitments. I think one thing is to commit, one thing is to implement. So we see that it's very hard, for instance, to gather the 100 billion euro which were promised at the international level. So the EU is fighting for that. So it's really important. Instead of going again to additional objectives, we should make sure that we can deliver on what was committed. And in the meantime, we should also continue the bilateral cooperation. The EU is also engaged in this dimension, be it through its general cooperation policy, its trade policy, any kind of cooperation, also region to region, is open. And the EU is certainly committed to do more in that respect with interested countries, be it in Asia, in Africa, or in America.
Thank you very much, Dr. Surachai. So what learning do you think we can take from our colleagues from other parts of the world?
Allow me to echo what our Mr. Councillor mentioned about commitment in international forum. I think we should compile, we should go along with international commitment under UNFCCC. As I mentioned, for the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, this is not equally. We agree to work in different level of responsibility. It means developed country should practice as they pledge to the conference of parties, like to donate in financial mechanisms like the Green Climate Fund, so we can move to green. I mean, developing country, we're ready to move, but we need support from international mechanisms. I don't mean we're not ready to move. For the lesson learned, if we focus on technology and innovation, we talk in international forums since Rio, I mean UNFCCC, to Sharm el-Sheikh, or to next to this year in UAE. technology and innovation is not enough to make the world greener, but it needs financial mechanisms to drive such technology and innovation. That's why COP urge technology people, technology mechanism to work more closely with financial mechanism. Technology need investment based on CBDR principle. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think Dr. Chirawat, you have the last word. So what do you think would be the learning that we can take from our colleagues from other parts of the world?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what I'm thinking is that I think in the real world, it is impossible to develop everybody to the same level at the same time. We have to accept that we have the leaders, we have the followers, so that in this kind of the concept, I think, for example, Asia Pacific may be the follower of some other leading country, for example, Japan, Europe, or America. I think what we can learn is not the method to develop, but we should look into the depth that by previous method, what is the good point and what is the, how can I say, some weak point that we should avoid. So that I think as the follower, we should have responsibility to, how can I say, develop, but without the weakness that the previous people face. And at the same time, Asia Pacific, not the last follower. So that we have to convey such kind of key points to the next follower again. I think this kind of spiral development is necessary for our global community.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chirawat, that was very, very clear. Before I thank our distinguished panelists, I just want to very briefly wrap up what has been discussed. I think the points are very clearly outlined for us by Mr. Feire when he mentioned that we need to find ways to capture the green window of opportunity as much as possible. We need to accelerate climate change solutions in the context of sustainable development. And we need to, most important of all, change the mindset of the people involved among all stakeholders. And although Dr. Surachai mentioned about the need for to strengthen the financial mechanisms, I believe at the end of the day, it's the willingness of people to really change their ways in order to embrace the green culture. And with that, please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists for this afternoon. And thank you very much, all of you, for sparing the time to join us at this discussion. And I think we can all promise that we will go and study the Technology and Innovation Report 2023 very diligently. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Dam, for moderating today's panel discussion. And thank you to our esteemed panelists for sharing your knowledge with us today. Esteemed speakers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the ITD, I would like to thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today.